Welcome back to Mind and Machine Africa, unlocking the potential of AI in Africa. This week, we are joined by Briggs, an AI industry expert, all the way from Silicon Valley and now in Africa, building innovative new startups with leveraging on AI. Welcome, Briggs.
Thank you.
Could you give the audience a brief introduction of yourself?
Yes, I'll give you a little bit of my background, especially my African background. I'm originally from Nigeria, where I did my undergraduate, and went to the US Stanford University, which is in the heart of the Silicon Valley, to do my master's, and subsequently did my PhD at the University of Illinois. And I was a professor for about 10 years. At major U.S. universities, and during that period, I wrote a textbook on design of computers, which was still very early, and was kind of used worldwide and gave a lot of visibility on how to design multi-cores, which is what is done today. And based on that, Sun Microsystems, which was a workstation company in the Silicon Valley, contacted me to come and help them build a multiprocessor system for servers. So that took me back to Silicon Valley. And I spent quite a lot of years in Silicon Valley developing multiprocessor systems. I did my own startup also in the Silicon Valley for about 4 years. Where we were building, servers and workstations and storage units. And subsequently, Intel, the chip company, also wanted to get into multi-cores. So again, they contacted me because that was a lot of my expertise. And so I joined Intel, where I subsequently stayed for about 17 years, developing and in charge of all their multiprocessor systems, which is what got into servers and all the multi-core technology they have today, and eventually retired from Intel and decided it was time to do something for the motherland. So that's what brought me back to Africa. And fortunately, I found an opportunity, and what was needed here in Kenya was, of course, building data centers. So I brought a lot of the data center capability and subsequently built a number of data centers here in Nairobi, maybe close to 10 of them. Wow. And in the process of doing that, I always had a dream of actually developing something that is more impactful for Africa. So I created a company called Afristec and started developing one major commercial application called Luna app, which is a social commerce super app for all of Africa, and which is now being in the beta stage. Hopefully, we would launch a product before the end of the year. We currently have over 135,000 users on the platform, and we're quite excited about the opportunities.
Thanks for that. It's quite a lot to unpack.
Yeah, yes.
The company Afristec, when you mentioned the name, first thing that came to my mind is Africa is tech.
Yes.
Is that what?
I named the company Afristec because I thought that it should basically encompass the technologies that are happening in Africa, and to also show that Africa is capable of developing a lot of these technologies that we know of in Silicon Valley. And that was what made me call it Afristec. And you can see one of the first products coming out is the Luna, which is pretty close to what you have in the Silicon Valley.
Yeah. So I guess there's a lot of talent that you've seen in Africa. I'm guessing your entire team is locally based in Africa.
Yes.
When you compare your startup journey in Silicon Valley and Africa, what are some of the distinctions that you see?
Well, the major thing that I see here as I started the company is trying to encourage people to think upfront about monetization, right? In Silicon Valley, anytime you start a any business at all, you really have to think of how am I going to make money from it? And especially if you're getting funding from a venture capital, how do you make sure that you satisfy the shareholders, requirements, which is you want to grow, you want to be profitable, and the growth is very important. So coming here, I got a team that was very capable technically, but then I had to spend quite a lot of time to also make people understand that the technical competence is one, but we also now need to pair it up with the business aspect of it. And the business aspect is just the monetization, right? So we build an application, a super app, that has all the monetization schemes embedded in it, but it's subliminal so that it doesn't stay in your face. Yeah. So I think my team, for example, now think that way, and everything they do, they think about how am I going to make money from it? And I think that's one of the things we need to promote a lot more in Africa, because there are very great talents here in Kenya that I've seen. And if we can just help incubate that, I think we have a huge opportunity to do things ourselves. Right?
So the talent pool in Kenya you've seen is richer than in Silicon Valley.
It's quite rich, and especially in software. Yeah. Software is something where you can get access to all the tools that you can get anywhere in the world. Yeah. So it's not as if you have software, it's only the expertise of Silicon Valley, right? People here in Kenya have had a lot of great training in software. They've developed quite a lot of applications that I've seen. So I would say it's fairly comparable, right, to what you find in Silicon Valley. But now trying to mold that team into creating products that you can think of globally. I think that's really what we need to push the effort, right?
Yeah. And going back to your experience in Silicon Valley, you were at the heart of a lot of, I guess, you were at the heart seeing the rise of artificial intelligence out of the research and AI startups that were being built around Silicon Valley. How was that experience for you?
Well, it actually started when I was a professor again. The textbook I wrote, in fact, in the first chapter, if I might say how old the textbook is, and was published in 1984. And the first chapter there was a section on artificial intelligence in 1984. So you can see that effort has been going on for quite some time. Even when I was a student at Stanford, you take courses in artificial intelligence. At that time, we all felt that a lot of it was a pipe dream, right? But artificial intelligence has evolved, and it's been continued to evolve. It has evolved into a point where people now at least accept the first step, machine learning, and really looking at predictive and, some of these techniques that they've put into it has evolved into a point. So in 1984, Japan took on a major project. There was a project that started, I think, in the early 80s in Japan. They call it the fifth generation project. Because at that time, US was way ahead in computing technology, and Japan wanted to leapfrog the US. So they call it the fifth generation project. And this fifth generation project is supposed to use Lisp. If you might remember, Lisp was a programming language. Yeah. And, how do you now design computers that can process those AI type scripts much faster? And unfortunately, the fifth generation project did not really pan out. A team was sent to Japan to actually study it. I was part of the team that was sent by the National Science Foundation. We wrote a paper on it. You can Google it and find out. US was pretty concerned about Japan leapfrogging them. There's one thing that I remember in Intel that I learned later on, is there's a quotation from one of the founders which says, only the paranoid survives. Yeah. And US extremely was paranoid. And so US invested a lot of money into looking at how do we also take AI and make sure that Japan does not go ahead of the US. So there's been a lot of investments as a result from the US research, community and the government itself through National Science Foundation and other funding methods to really spur a lot of AI research in universities. And part of what you now see eventually coming out is all part of the research that was funded by the US companies and US government. So I think it's important to understand that AI as we have it didn't happen just all of a sudden.
Yeah.
It's been going on since the early 70s that I can remember.
Yeah.
And it has evolved to a point now where we are yet at another phase of it. Yeah. And the potential is really huge, but that's not the end of AI. We're still going to find a lot more opportunities and more sophisticated AI algorithms coming out in the future.
Yeah. I know everyone, with all the hype that has been going on after the large language models and the generative AI models that have been out there, everyone has been wondering, AI is going to be sentient, or when we ever see superintelligence or artificial general intelligence. And there's a lot of research and papers that have been written on it. And well before we get to that level of computation, of course, there's always that concept of we need to find the right hardware, we need to find the right algorithms to do these things. Do you sometimes sit and think there's an opportunity for Africa to actually be the ones now to leapfrog and build the next thing that comes after like for example, the transformers? I'm sure in maybe 10, 20 years or even sooner, with the level of research going on, we may move away from transformers to something else where now foundational models are not built through transformers. There could be something different that will come up. Is there an opportunity for Africa to get ahead of that? And how do you see Africa either replicating how it was done in the Silicon Valley or trying something uniquely its own?
Yeah, I think I see clearly, the way I would kind of separate this is that, I look at the West and what they have done so far with, AI, the language models and the generative ones. And I know that they can take it to the next step. One of the major aspects that has been going on, if you probably are aware, is this self-driving cars.
Yeah.
The self-driving cars, the research has been going on for quite some time. And now there are some cars that are actually in San Francisco, Austin, a few other cities, that is driverless. Yeah. But the experiment so far, even though it took quite a long time, because you use a lot of learning algorithms, right? It's still not to the level of where the human is, right? And I still don't expect it to be quite at the level of where the human is, because one of the things that I see, if I take that as an example, I come to others, is that for a self-driving car, it's using sensors. All these sensors still don't have the depth and vision capabilities that a human eye does, which is connected, not just the eye itself, but it's connected to your brain, is connected into so many things. So the amount of processing power that you would need to try to replicate what a human is doing in a car is significant, right? So of course they've tried to do some approximations so that it doesn't consume quite a lot of energy for a driverless car, because the battery in the car is limited in terms of what it's capable to do before you recharge it. So I still don't. I'm one of those that don't quite feel that driverless cars will get up to the same capabilities of humans. Certainly, I believe that driverless cars would work well if you design a new city, especially, and you have all the sensors in the city, and there are people follow rules. Certainly, I don't see a driverless car walking in Nairobi, right, with the matatus or the bodabodas that have their own set of rules. So in that area, I wouldn't see some of those applications, but certainly applications that I think that might help in things like education, right? We can we can apply AI within Africa to develop tools that can supplement education for children that are growing up.
Yeah.
So that at least it's as if you have a self-tutor,
Yeah.
right? And that self-tutor can actually take on the characteristic of maybe the teachers or what they're used to. I think those are, I would call it low-hanging fruits, because education is something that is pervasive across Africa. Everywhere you go, people still want to have a good education for their children to provide opportunities.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the areas I see AI coming in. I see AI coming in areas in agriculture, because anything we can do to improve the yield and of agriculture, or take climate issue into consideration and use that to help farmers to improve their agricultural thing. I think any type of AI we can develop in that area would be very beneficial, right? So I see things like that in those areas. But if I come to industry, of course, unless we start pushing heavy manufacturing, and in heavy manufacturing, I see AI certainly becoming very, very useful, right? So those are just some examples that I think. Now, if you look at even the large language models and generative that they've used, it's still very applicable, to things within Africa, right? Both in terms of, preserving our own native languages, right? I think there are ways that people can use AI to actually even now make the language richer, and actually preserve some of those languages. So I feel that if localization of the AI tools apply to African languages, and it's the most diverse continent you can feel. I mean, if you're talking
dialects.
Probably more than 2,000. I know Nigeria alone, there are over 200 language tribes that I can think of. So I think those are areas we can use AI so that we can help preserve those languages, and also help those that are in the rural area to improve their own language and vocabulary, because there are a lot of vocabularies that we're lacking in our own native languages. I mean, what is a transistor, for example, right? So there are things like that I think AI could potentially be helpful. But in anything we do, I still point out that we should take a step back to say, is there a monetization scheme to this, right? Because you can't just go and develop something and give it away for free, because how do you pay the developers? How do you make sure that there's a return on investment? So I think the monetization scheme is very critical in anything we do, even if we want to apply it locally. And I think that's where I feel that AI should now be looked at. How do we apply it to the African landscape? Right.
I think when you touched on language and its preservation, I think that speaks to the root of one of my biggest concerns around AI and our consumption as Africa of AI is AI hegemony. And because AI has, the AI models being developed learn and they remember, because at least they're able to impart back to their data sets and make decisions or do their predictions. It becomes sort of like we're building a library for human existence. And if African data is not well represented, then you have future models. If you are building an AI to design how humans would live on Mars, there's no representation of Africa, because the culture, the language, the art is gone, because it was never used to train these models. I think it's important that Africa actually has that opportunity. Of course, it's very expensive just to, I guess, even to come up with a model similar to ChatGPTs in the hundreds of millions. And then that's just on maybe their compute. There's also the infrastructure for it, getting the GPUs and all that is expensive. But as Africa working collaboratively to preserve probably the richest form of the richest and most diverse cultures. If you look at dialects in itself, over 2,000 dialects, preserving them. And actually what you mentioned about growing the dialects, which when I look back, Kenya, we speak Swahili, and there are words which you see, which you feel are the same because the computer, but they change the spelling.
Right.
So AI can actually come up with probably better new words, better vocabulary in the future, because it's already happened where we've seen AI models that have been trained on maybe 10,000 words in one dialect actually come up with more words for that same dialect, which already exist. So you find if you train it on 10,000 words, your vocabulary could be 1 million words.
Exactly.
It'll find a way to come up with those 1 million words, which are similar to what you have, to the context. So it's like it reinvented the wheel exactly the way humans would have reinvented it. And then it catches up to the level of humans and then goes beyond that by improving. So I can honestly see, and maybe this touches back to what you're doing with Luna, where African culture, I guess this is how it should be monetized. You said there should always be a monetization angle to it, is where now the African dialect, the African stories are now a part of human history in this AI, because, for example, if you wanted to remove those data sets, I was reading that it costs about $50 million to do machine unlearning. So you could imagine that's a lot of money to businesses to lose. So there's a lot of potential, yes, in preserving the culture, and also potential to create new industries, because with this, I guess now with the African culture blended into, if you look at the vocabulary, the art, now you have new stories to be told, new content to be created. You may have movies, comics, shows in new dialects. You may have startups coming up where certain African dialects are taught, like what's Babel, which allows you to learn a new dialect, and that's how they monetize. So there's potential for monetizing even African languages through AI.
Yeah, I think you actually touched on a number of things that are really important to me. If I take a look at, I used to be a musician. I love music.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I looked at the time I was growing up, we didn't have the opportunity to create music and find a way to monetize it as much. If you remember, all the way to having long playing records, to cassettes, to CDs, and now DVDs. So you look at the whole distribution model.
Yeah.
It was not easy for somebody who would create a music in Kenya or someone who would create music in Nigeria to be able to actually sell that, and get millions of, followers or users. Technology has changed that. What technology? Of course, we now have YouTube, we have TikTok, right, and a number of other platforms, including Luna, that now you can create content, and that content can be consumed very quickly by millions of users, right? So the reason I'm trying to use that as an example is that if you look at AI develops a technology. In the case of music, there's a lot of the underlying infrastructure. That is, you have more synthesizers that can create African sounds. So you can get the amapiano, better rumba or better Afrobeat and other things, all from those electronic synthesizers that they've created. So it gives you, as an African in your creative space, to now enhance your culture, right? Because you have all those instruments that now you can synthesize on some of those things and create good. Then the next thing is the distribution model, right? In terms of how do I monetize it? Now you can quickly publish, or you can create a video, in a studio like this. All of these equipments are now available. If you look at it, 20 years ago, we didn't have all this. So now you can easily create video content, edit it, and really publish it very quickly, right? So I look at AI exactly the same thing. It's going to be a set of tools that tools would enhance a lot of our creativity. And we can now localize it for Africa, and all that diversity, and create something which other people can't touch. And I think that's the first opportunity, which I call again the low-hanging fruit for AI.
Yeah.
The tools are going to be there. The question is, how do we use that quickly and adapt it to our own cultures so that we can monetize it? So that's one of the things that I've seen, and I'll use that analogy of music as another example, right? Because it's just a set of tools. We can, but in this particular case, it's not just having those electronic equipment or the cameras or the videos, which we don't build. But now we actually have the opportunity to use those tools which are in software. Now we can get all those tools and we can modify some of those tools to fit our own cultural needs and then just exploit it in the market. I think that's really the way I look at it. Because we don't have to do things necessarily all the way from scratch. There are open source software, even in AI, that we can use and tend to localize it. We did the same thing for Luna. Right? There are some open source, and we use a lot of open source in the development of Luna. But again, we localize it to fit a lot of what we need in our environment. And I see AI pretty much going in that same space within Africa, right?
When you speak of localization, a thought just came into my mind around localization of AI in Africa. Compared to the West, where the diversity in culture is, especially in the US, is not that deep.
Yes.
Compared to Africa.
Right.
So the localization of AI for Africa has to be sort of nitpicked for each specific region, or so we have so many diverse cultures.
Yes.
Would it make sense to have one model that has an understanding of all these cultures, or to localize individually for each region?
I think it has to be a learning thing, because if let's say we take it and look at Swahili, within Swahili there are constructs that you would create. So if you now tell it to say, okay, what would the word computer could have been based on what it has learned of what Swahili is, right? And some of those basic constructs, it can come up with its own word, right? That still fits into the Swahili language and flow, everything that in that. Now, if you parameterize that, it can still apply to, if you're using a different language, maybe from Mali or Chad or Ghana, Twi or something. One thing that I've seen for most of the African languages, there are some commonality in terms of those constructs. And I think getting the AI to a point where we can now say we parameterize it so that you develop, if you developed it here in Kenya, you parameterize it well enough that you can easily export it to a different African country and they can pick a different parameter and use it for their language. I think that's the way I look at things, because you don't want to develop things only for a given country, because the market opportunity is pretty small. Africa is about 1.3 billion people. Why don't we take advantage of that, but build in that diversity that is really one of our, that's really our base. That is the most diverse continent with many different languages, dialects and all that. But even though there are different languages and dialects, there is still some commonality that you can develop as constructs.
It's interesting. If you can go back to when you mentioned education as one of the lowest hanging fruits and turn that to language and the localization aspect, this would allow learning to be done in local dialects. For whichever subjects, even the STEM subjects could be done in local dialect. And I think there's value to that. And I think we've seen, for example, a lot of the naming of the animals, their botanical names are in Latin. We have certain German terms that are used in mathematics, some Arabic terms in mathematics. So there's some connection between language education and the involvement of societies through their sciences. And it looks like AI could only spearhead this for Africa to move faster. So clearly it's a low-hanging fruit, but a very ripe low-hanging fruit.
Absolutely. I wanted to get back to an area that I think is important for me to mention. me growing up, a lot of the comics I read were, of course, the same Superman, Spider-Man. Batman. Everything was just all to the West.
Yeah.
Now it's gone from comics to now they have, basically movies and all that based on those characters. We've seen the beginning of movies like Wakanda or The Woman King that is coming up. There is a huge opportunity for us using AI tools to now create our own African characters. These African characters, people can then write also scripts with AI, either in local languages, right? Or whichever the formal languages you use in that particular country, so that children can start identifying with African superheroes, right? I really would like to see that really promoted. And in fact, it's something we discussed in Afristec and in Luna, because we want to see those applets on Luna so that children can now start getting either comics or short movies of a given African superhero character that has been developed. All those things you can do with AI. So again, that's part of that localization. Because if you started in Kenya, there's no doubt that other countries will pick up the same set of tools that you develop, and then they will create their own superheroes. Because as I say, it's so diverse. I'd like to see something that recreates Mensa Musa, the richest guy we know in Africa, with all the gold. There are so many empires. There's the Oyo Empire. There were Mau Mau fighters here. Why don't we create our own superheroes and actually use AI to create those heroes and educate the children so that they know that, hey, we had our own culture and great warriors too, right? I think that's really critical, and I'd like to see that as being again one of those because the tools are there.
Yeah,
today.
the tools are there. Actually, speaking to that, because I know me and my brother have been on and off working on a concept of, we once thought of, when we were younger kids, we thought of writing a comic. I think we did a few pages, we were drawing together and we stopped. Then now we got into game development and you are like, what if we build a narrative story that has African warriors? So picking the heroes from the various stories you've read in history and have them battle across Africa or battle a common evil of some sort.
Absolutely.
And it's been a painstaking process, and of course work and other things get in the way, and it sort of drops down in priority. But you can see now there's an opportunity with AI, because even game development studios and engines like Unity and forgetting the other one. But for example, Unity have now built AI where you can use AI to create environments. And for example, that's one of the hardest things in gaming to do, is the physics for the environment. And so that's expensive and there's very few skilled people. And now the low-hanging fruit is there for you to use AI to generate these environments.
Absolutely.
As fast as you imagine them, you just need a compute to describe and then move a few things around and you've built a wonderful environment. If I can pick back when you said we could have these comics or the short films in English or whatever dialect, I think it's important to have them in African dialect.
Absolutely.
And when I look at it, it's from, for example, I love the Japanese comics and the animations, the animes. And for the life of me, I can't watch anime in English. I have to watch it in having them speak Japanese, and I have to keep up with reading the subtitles. And I find there's more quality to it when it's in its native form than when it's adapted. So then they dub it into English. So I think also Africa should copy the same path with Japan, and because for example, Japan's I think even that industry for Japan will grow significantly, because they used to hand draw every frame. Then they started animating with tools, and now there's AI where you could give it 10 animated pages, give it a script and tell it, finish the rest of the work for me. So I think we'll see, like you rightfully said, there's going to be a huge explosion of content in Africa. And hopefully it will be African content that's exploding, because remember, Africa, as you mentioned, has 1.3 billion people. In 30 years, we're going to be the continent. As a continent, we'll have the largest population. We can't just be the largest population, and the only thing we have to give to this AI future is the data to train. And then what we consume is westernized, or is not our own culture, because that again goes back to the AI hegemony. And then again, we lose value, because selling it, our data is just a raw material, not as a finished good, has little to no monetary value to us.
Yeah, because I really strongly believe that if you develop, also Africa, I say we have probably the largest set of artists. There are so many artists. I look at here in Kenya, there are so many artists that are out there that can draw lots of characters. There are graphic artists that have been trained in many universities, such as Multimedia University. If you bring those people together, you bring app developers together, which is what, again, we're trying to do in Luna, by creating a portal where people can come together. You have an idea, so why don't we create an applet? Or why don't we create a comic? Or why don't we create a short video? You can sell some of those things for 100 shillings or less than 100 shillings, but because you're producing them quite frequently, right? You can see that with, let's say, 10,000 people buying your comics, across every week, because you have new chapters or new stories and so on, you make good money, right? So this monetization is something I said, and that's one of the things we built into Luna, because we give you the opportunity to now put it on a platform where it can easily be discovered, right? So those are the kind of things that we really want to encourage. I think this is the time for us. The tools are there in place. We just need to get the community together, the artists together, the graphic artists, the app developers, and let's say, how do we collaborate to create content that we can all monetize? I think that's really the challenge that we have to try to address.
I think it's also an underlying benefit that maybe is not too often spoken about when we think about AI's impact in Africa. We think about it solving some of our larger issues around our food crisis, or how can we use AI to monitor elections and ensure they are safe and secure? How can we use AI to fix banking? But there's also, at the very bottom of the pyramid, how can AI just help someone move from earning 2,000 shillings or 100 shillings a day to 10,000 shillings a day, because now they have tools for them to work better, work faster, and produce more.
And I think that's really what I want to stress. Those days of using AI to help agriculture, the West is going to create it. And those tools will be available. Some of them might be in open source, and we can just grab it and apply it to us. We don't necessarily need to invent it, because agriculture is something that's across all countries, and they have to find a way to, continue to improve food security. But I think the opportunity is there now to say, how do I use AI to actually help and promote the diversity that is in Africa? And I think that's because in promoting that diversity, you can also monetize. And that's really what we have to continue to think about. Because how do I create it and how do I monetize? The opportunity is right there.
So it's getting AI into the informal sector, which is probably the largest workforce Africa has. And then improving that workforce, improving the quality of whatever they produce, the frequency of production, and also the market reach, especially if what AI is going to help improve is, for example, digital content. It's now not just limited to your contacts on your phone or a small community. Now you have the world at your disposal.
Absolutely, at your disposal. And again, you can cut across Africa. And the kind of platform we've created, I can be in Senegal and I can say, oh, let me drop down the menu and look at Kenya. And say, I look at Kenya and I can see, hey, maybe there are some great content here that has been created. and now they contact the developers or so on. How can we localize that for Senegal?
Yeah.
Right? That's really what we want to promote, with our platform.
I think when I feel like this conversation in particular really speaks to AI reaching as far down the grassroots as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And what you said about let the West figure out the bigger problems with AI, because they will, because they're inherently global problems that we all share. If they are already ahead and working on it, let them fix that. But there are certain problems unique to Africa. And that's what you're saying AI should focus on,
Absolutely.
the unique problems.
Absolutely.
And also the unique opportunities.
Absolutely.
Which instrument did you play?
I played the guitar, and at that time, parents used to tell us, "Oh, if you're a musician, you won't make any money."
Yeah.
Right. So even though I enjoyed playing the guitar in the band, I played in nightclubs, just as I see many musicians here.
Yeah.
But what they played the music got me into is that in the band they assigned me to say, "Oh, you're in charge of the electronics equipment."
Yeah.
So I got into interest. I developed interest in electronics equipment.
Yeah.
And then I decided to build my own amplifiers.
Okay.
And that's what got me into electrical engineering.
Oh.
So you see, there are ways of actually meandering to find your core niche, right?
Yeah.
That's what got me directly into electrical engineering, and the rest is history, right?
This is a very long, beautiful history.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
You've been at the heart of a lot of development around multi-cause, which one wouldn't it's not like money. We didn't expect your face on it, but it's clearly a huge impact nonetheless.
Yeah. It's been quite a journey. I enjoyed it, and I think it's great opportunity now to also impact some of the young people developing to say how can we use our own knowledge to help make Africa better and solve local problems. One point I'll always that I found very challenging is that if you look at the West, over maybe 90% of the economy is formal. Yeah. On the other hand, if you look at Africa, over 80% or 85% of the economy is informal. Yeah. So you require different solutions for those formal and informal. Yeah. And if you look at a lot of the tools that have been developed in the West, they were not developed for the informal sector. Yeah. So that's why we wanted to focus in making sure that we address and embrace the informal sector in anything that we're doing. Right?
So if I can ask about Luna, it's you've been working on the Luna for how long now?
Over 4 years.
Over 4 years.
Yes.
So clearly it's been a labor of love. It's taken its time. And when you look at sort of how you source your team, and probably also how you sourced, I don't know if the funding was bootstrapped or there's a VC, but then when you look at if you were to speak to other African startups that are looking to leverage on artificial intelligence to solve for the informal sector, to solve for Africa's unique challenges, what do you think are some of the things that they need to look out for?
Funding is always a critical issue. I would like to implore the government to always put a little bit of allocation for local R&D and to spur not only universities, maybe to spur things like this, where eventually the government gets back its money because you would end up taxing all those applets that are sold, right? Yeah. So there's a way of, and moreover, if the companies themselves are successful, that the government has invented it, you have employees and you'll be able to tax also their income. Yeah. So there are many ways for that I've seen in Western countries where they encourage corporations to come in and they incentivize them with things. Like if you look at Tesla, Elon Musk, or going to build a whole battery farm, there are many states that are vying, they solicited, say, hey, please come and invest in our state. Yeah. We'll give you land for free for 25 years or something like that. You have to create an incentive to bring people in,
Yeah.
because they know long term, if they bring in that factory to say Texas, it employs, 10,000 people.
Yeah.
10,000 people, there is income.
Yeah.
Income tax, the state makes money,
Yeah.
or something like that. Although Texas doesn't have state income tax, but I'm just picking somewhere like Arizona or other places. Or at the same time, the business itself is taxed.
Yeah.
So it's good for the government to invest, to encourage the youth to create, these mini startups, so that all these opportunities we're talking about can come to be. It's one thing that I would really like to see once Afristec is at a point where we're making money. I would really want to invest in promoting a lot of those small startups to actually create the kind of things we're talking about, because I think the opportunity is huge.
Yeah. So there's, I think also, maybe if I could ask, with ChatGPT's big boom came sometime in November of last year.
Right.
And there's been this rush where we've seen companies form quickly which leverage off of using their API to find solutions for reading PDF documents, chatbots for other purposes, personal assistants have been built. And it feels, it's like you said, those are challenges maybe predominantly needed in the West. There are certain localized problems you need to solve. However, it's also created the notion that you need to build very quickly, and you need to get out of your ideation into a product very fast, which isn't the case. For example, if I look at what Luna, for example, with Luna, over 4 years, spent meticulously building the right product. Should AI startups focus on speed, or should they take their time?
No, I think speed is relevant here, because what Luna did is that we were developing a platform for Africa, right? And to develop that platform, as I discussed, you want to make sure that somebody in Tunisia or Senegal can use the same platform, right? And quickly, but you also, even though they're using the same platform, you give them opportunities to monetize things that they can use on the platform. We've done that with people bringing in the marketplace or service providers coming in onto the platform from each locality. We've done it where even educational outlets can be localized and brought into the platform. So the platform is just totally universal. But if you want going to do the AI thing where you want to try to monetize quickly, you have the speed becomes critical. Like we talked about the comics, maybe the video clips and so on. Those are things that can be done. I would say usually if you do it in 2 to 3 months, you always publish an applet. In 2 to 3 months, you're publishing an applet. Because if you have a series of stories in a comic, chapter 1, chapter 2 to chapter whatever, 100, each chapter you publish, you're making money. Next chapter, you're making money. You see, that's the same way. So that speed is very critical. Making sure that developments take about 2 to 3 months and you publish, then your revenue stream can now, increase over time. Because if you try to take a long time, because the tools are there, your learning curve gets shorter, right? And you can actually create these things very quickly. I think that's the opportunities that we have, and we should exploit it.
So we should exploit speed.
Speed.
Right. I think that's
speed and diversity. You're bringing out lots of products.
And also, I think also as you kept speaking, I think it also felt like it's not just a conversation to startups, it's also a conversation to individuals, because you don't need to start a company to localize comics or to come up with a script or a short film. This is an ability for a single individual to benefit and monetize.
Absolutely. I mean, 1, 2, 3 people can work together very quickly and produce things that they can monetize. And I think that's the opportunity we have, and that's the phase we are in. With a lot of the tools that are out there, let people collaborate. That's why we're creating this collabo. App developer, graphic designer, maybe content creator, in that case. It could be a teacher, it could be anybody, it could be a teacher who wants to now, they have notes on history in Kenya. Maybe there are ways we can now animate that or create short video scripts that tells you about the history of Kenya. I mean, there are things like that that are just low-hanging fruit that you can use the tools, AI tools to do.
Yeah. I think also it also helps in future. I can see with what Luna is doing, perhaps it's also now doing data capture. Or maybe I call it data transformation, for lack of a better word. We have a lot of data in Africa that is verbally exchanged, there's no digital record of this data. And now there's an opportunity to create digital records, the preservation. That preservation in itself is now creating an opportunity for us to have more content to train African models for. So I would see also Luna is, as much, you call it a platform, and it is a platform, and now I'm seeing it as a platform for data sets.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
I totally agree.
It could be the first. I would love to see it. I have this idea of always thinking of a utopian future, and I can thinking Luna is going to be the data set for culture, and not just culture. It could be culture, it could be language, it could be education, it could be some of small cash-based. The cash, it's very difficult. So as I digress, cash is king in Africa, and with a marketplace like Luna, you are now almost not able to track cash, but it's getting closer than what's existing there. So now you're able to map out microeconomies and macroeconomies and their interrelationship. To me, it sounds like a video game where I can pick an item from here, move it here, and watch the effect. What does that effect? What happens if the food production in maybe Limuru is shifted to another region in Kenya? What does that mean? Do we have more crops? Do we have better storage? What is the exact repercussion of that? And I think that data could be found in such platforms that from super apps like Luna.
Yes, I think with a lot of what I've seen on the AI tools, let's say I created a comic and it's in Swahili.
Yeah.
With the tools, you can easily, if we have developed, the constructs well enough, from Swahili, you can easily have that same comic in a different language, or even a local language, whether it's Kisii or whether it's, or any of those different Kenyan languages.
Yeah.
You could easily just create that.
Yeah.
I think that's where we want to get to, because we want to make it so that it's available not only for those that are, that are super educated, which is what a lot of the Western platforms are.
Yeah.
But I want to bring it down to somebody in my village that has a smartphone.
Yeah.
Let them also have that experience of being able to watch that comic in their own dialect.
Yeah.
That's what I want to see. That is Africa. Now, if you take that and you spread it across the continent, can you imagine what the opportunity would be?
Africa looks very beautiful.
Yes,
when I picture it in my head.
Yes.
It's amazing because on a previous episode with Mutembe, we discussed how we can push artificial intelligence for it to be sort of invisible when we're supporting issues around healthcare and education and agriculture. But then there's also a use case, and that speaking of, where it can also be in front of someone. It can be a product that is able to reach someone, and it's built through artificial intelligence, and it's reaching someone who doesn't need to have such a level of competency that the tools that we currently have, like ChatGPT, Claude, and Midjourney, require you to have. So it's localized, and it's I guess, for lack of a better word, it's dumbed down in terms of the difficulty. So it's accessible to all. It's democratized.
That is the whole point. I mean, we know that with the tools here, you can just apply it to Kenya, bring in artists, and the kind of different art that they've really drawn within Kenya.
Yeah.
You can bring in, pictures of animals, pictures of different environments, and you tell it create.
Yeah.
It can create, different renditions of that.
Yeah.
That is still keeping the culture intact. That is then the environment intact. The fact that you have those same, animals and all that. And so the opportunity is limitless. You do that, now you can say, let me export it to a different African country where they have different set of animals and different set of constructs of art.
Yeah.
And they can easily do the same thing for them. And you can monetize that same skill. The first one you've created, you can export it and also make money from there.
Yeah. Just as a thought, remember how African art is stored away in European museums.
Yes.
Now with AI in Africa, for Africans being localized, our art is ours. We actually, sort of us taking it back, in a sense, taking part of it back and preserving it for ourselves. I think it's been a very insightful conversation, and I think I seen the social impact as well as how you can monetize it. I think that's been brilliant. It's been brilliant to hear your tremendous journey through Nigeria, to Silicon Valley, Intel, stories around Japan, and now coming into Kenya where you started Afristec and Luna. If you have any parting words for the listeners.
What I would really say is that, one of the reasons why I decided to focus here in Kenya, and as I started developing my data center, I came across a lot of talented young people. And I just thought that it was a great environment to use this talent to create a platform which we can now spread to the rest of Africa.
Yeah.
I think given that the knowledge is here in Kenya, given that the tools are there, given that there is a good penetration of smartphones, given that there's a good educational system and all that, I think combining all of that, let's find a way to uplift, especially most of those that are in the informal sector, to now participate in a new digital economy where everybody has opportunity to make a lot more money and improve their lifestyle. That's really what I'm looking for.
Thank you so much, Briggs. It's been a pleasure and an honor having you here. Please listen in to the upcoming episodes, and please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast on all your podcast streaming channels. Thank you.
Thank you.